Coming up next.
I felt that that answer would come in that next car, in that next Rolls Royce, in that next 60-foot yacht, or the next woman. And when I got there and it wasn't, then I began to hate these things.
Addicted to power, sex, money, all the things of the good life. Is this a dream life or a nightmare world?
Every day, someone was going to be out there trying to kill me. And I never knew, any day that I kissed my kids goodbye, I never knew if I would ever kiss them again.
The power of addiction, next on Main Street. Welcome to On Main Street. I'm Dale Meyer. Sex, drugs, gambling, alcohol. We suffer from many addictions. On Main Street, correspondent Brian Ward has uncovered the story of one man who fought the demons of several addictions. I'm interested to hear your report. Brian?
Dale, this man had many addictions, but he found the most powerful addiction was the addiction to power. His life has been one extreme roller coaster ride, from the heights of making $1 million a day to the dark, dismal, rat-infested dungeon of torture in a Panama prison. But one thing remained constant in Jorge Valdez's life: his addiction to money, sex, alcohol, and most of all, power.
At one time, I was considered one of the most powerful men in America and responsible for over 95% of all the cocaine that came into this country.
His climb to the top was swift and reached a summit of dizzying heights.
When I was 20 years old, I had 2 Lear jets, my own jet Ranger. I had mansions in every country and city that I went to because I hated to carry a suitcase where I went. I drove around in a Rolls Royce. I had a fleet of cars.
But even the crash of his cocaine-filled plane in Panama and his subsequent arrest and torture could not pull Jorge away from his addictions.
The world made me feel like I was a god, that I was invincible. I mean, I'm making all this money. I go around with 10 bodyguards willing to die for me at any moment. I buy and sell whoever I want, and I have the power to give life and to take life away. So what, God? Forget about God. I'm God today. I've made it. But I was empty. And that's what I could not understand. Couldn't figure out. It was driving me mad.
Common in many addicts, Jorge made excuses for the powerful pull of his addictions.
I got involved thinking I wasn't hurting anyone, that I was involved in a victimless crime. And we felt that if the high society of America, that's what they wanted to indulge themselves in, well, we'd supply it. And we weren't harming anyone. And it's the greatest lie on earth. I never took someone's life by putting a bullet in his head. But how many did I take by bringing cocaine into America? The reason that I kept accumulating all this money and all this power was because I was searching for some meaning to my life.
Jorge realized having everything a man could dream of still could not erase the torture of his addictions.
I was just the most miserable human being in the world, that I had tried to find the answers to my happiness in everything the world had to offer. And it was always a dead end. And needless to say, I was destroying my family. I was destroying everybody around me. With me, it took hitting rock bottom.
Joining us now is Dr. Jorge Valdez, author of Coming Clean. Welcome to On Main Street.
My pleasure.
May I call you George?
Yes, please.
My Spanish isn't up to snuff yet. Tell us about hitting rock bottom.
Well, you know, it's reaching that point in your life that, for me, it was the whole world wanting to be like Jorge Valdez, and me looking around and saying, how can it be? I want to be like anyone but Jorge Valdez. Why is it that now that I have everything the world had to offer, why is it that all these people want to be so much like me and I want something else? Why am I still empty? Why am I worse empty than when I began this journey as a 10-year-old boy starving to death in the streets of Miami?
You're an immigrant from Cuba to Miami at the age of 10. And through crime, you became, like you said, your own God. Tell me about the Corvettes, when you had to pick a Corvette.
Well, I tell people that one of the hardest decisions I had to make every day was what car I was going to drive. And it got to a point in my life that I felt that society told me forever that happiness would come through the accumulation of material possessions. I love cars. When the Corvette convertibles came out, I couldn't figure out which color I wanted, so I bought one of each color. That would normally, I mean, going back to a 10-year-old coming to the streets of Miami and suddenly seeing a 68 GTO, and this was in 66, I said, wow, I will be the happiest man on earth if I ever have that. Working very, very hard all my life, and the only thing I could do, since I worked full-time and went to school full-time, was drive by all those mansions and say, tell my girlfriend, you know, Nettie, I'll be happy the day I have a house like that. I will have a house like that. And then tell my parents, Mom, Dad, I'm going to buy you a big house one day.
And you did it. You had it all. And you bought the Corvettes of all colors, and you were still empty. Tell me now about the addictions that you experienced and that you see in society today.
And I see it in kids constantly, and I see it in all. We have been taught by society that happiness equals money, equals success, equals possessions. The addictions to me was not that I said to myself, I'm addicted to cars or I'm addicted to women, which eventually, if one addiction really prevailed in my life, was the addiction to sex. But it's a search to fill a void that exists within yourself that you think that it can be filled either through cars that you like, or it could be through houses, or it could be through many relationships with a person of the opposite sex, many different ways, but it's basically just trying to fill that emptiness in that hole that exists.
And you're saying that that emptiness, that void in a person's life runs through all addictions.
And it permeates all addictions. No one starts, for example, with me, and people say, well, you know, smoking marijuana is not bad, why not legalize it? I tell people, no one starts shooting heroin into their veins. People start with marijuana. Then what happens? Marijuana doesn't make them happy, so they need something a little stronger. So they try cocaine. That doesn't fill that void. Then they try something harder, heroin. Let's go to people that take pharmaceutical drugs. They start with one pill, a Halcyon or Valium, and that doesn't fill that void. That doesn't give them that peace, so they try more, and eventually you see these people devastated and destroyed. It's this thing that the more of whatever that substance is going to provide the answer for us, or it's going to fill the void. When it doesn't, we keep going more and more, and that permeates through all addictions in life.
And you're speaking from history, because you didn't start with a drug addiction. You just did a little dabbling in cocaine in your history, and it went on from there, didn't it?
Well, and that was at the end of my life. And here, you take drugs, for example, in my case, when I was in charge of the cartel, we had a rule not to use no drugs. We could use no drugs. Why did Jorge Valdez eventually, at the end of my drug career, use cocaine? And, you know, it took me years to really figure. As a matter of fact, to be honest, it took me editing Coming Clean to figure out why I was so against drugs. Why did I eventually succumb to it? And what it was this whole pattern in my life, this emptiness that I wanted to fill through all these different substances, that I finally said, well, maybe drugs is the answer.
Mm-hmm. You said editing Coming Clean. I've read the book, and it is absolutely fascinating. I'd encourage that you read it. I'd also encourage you to get our free program offer, a woman-to-woman cassette tape. And this tape includes interviews with people who have struggled or know of struggles with addiction. Senator George McGovern, for example, and then also First Lady Betty Ford. Let's listen to a portion of our free offer now.
For them to be able to say it out loud, to acknowledge and to accept the fact that they have an addiction, is the acceptance of, yes, this is my disease and I own it.
We heard Mrs. Ford talking about her experience with addiction. How and when did you come to realize that you were addicted?
I came to realize that probably almost pretty soon in my drug career. When I looked back one day and I said, you know, I thought that when I make $100,000, I'd be happy and that's all, and I get out. Here I am making $2-3 million a month. Why more? And probably the event in going to Bolivia, when everyone in the cartel was telling me, listen, just continue doing what we're doing, $1 million, $2 million a month, that's enough. Yet I wanted to go to Bolivia and make this deal to make $21 million. I realized at that moment I was addicted. I was on a search to have more and more grandeur, and nothing was going to stop. Nothing was really going to fulfill that addiction. Nothing was ever going to put a stop to it.
Do you miss any of the things that you had before?
I miss them all.
You miss them all. Man, tell me about that.
You know, the thing about it is people say, when you have all this power, how can you go through life now without it? And I tell people, I do. I go through without it. I miss it. Who doesn't miss feeling like God? Who doesn't miss going to the store and buying whatever he wants to buy? The difference is that now that hole that was filled, that was inside my body and my mind and my soul has been filled. It's filled with a relationship with Jesus. And as I look back, my flesh misses the things that life provided. But what my flesh does not miss is the incarceration that those addictions brought. The life that I thought that I'd be free by having all this now, and yet I created a prison around my whole life and all devastation that came with it.
There are countless people, as you know very well, that are incarcerated in their addictions. How can that grip of addiction be broken? That when we return.
We got to look at that road that we've left behind and see how many we've trampled and hurt to get to where we're at. But I had no other road to turn to. Nothing the world had to offer gave me any choices, gave me any peace at all.
Women and Drugs, Deceptions and Deliverance is the title of a free cassette of the Woman to Woman National Radio Show. Betty Ford is a guest. Call 1-800-876-9880. Ask for offer number 9922.
When the world looked at me and said, wow, you just got it made. I mean, you're dating the prettiest women in America and you're flying around to all these wonderful places and you're miserable? Impossible. But I was.
Welcome back to On Main Street. I'm Dale Meyer. With me today is Dr. Jorge Valdez. At one point, he was making $3 million a month. He's written his life story, Coming Clean. George, I've heard it said that the only person who can change an addict is the addict himself. Is that true?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think that once a person gets to that point in life, there has to be something more to drive him, to motivate him. It's almost like when I tell kids as I speak all over the country, especially to gang kids that have a very low level of education, I say, you know, your eschatology defines your ethics.
and back the truck up. Your eschatology defines your ethics. What in the world does that mean? I told you I'm not too good at Spanish.
Exactly. It just gives me it warms up the crowd when they say, what? And basically, the way I tell them is, let me just refine it to terminology you can understand. How you look at tomorrow really dictates how you behave today.
Okay, now take that. How I look at tomorrow dictates how I behave today. How do we apply that in the life of someone who is addicted?
A person that's addicted in my eyes, has no tomorrow. A person that's addicted goes from day to day in that addiction, goes from just satisfying that hunger and that emptiness that day. It doesn't matter. He's not looking at what's going to happen a week down the road, 2 weeks, a year, because if he was, then how could he behave in that manner? How he continue in that pattern when he sees how that behavior a week or 2 weeks, the consequences that it would bring. So he doesn't look at that, or she doesn't look at that. She looks at getting up that morning, whether it's alcohol, getting drunk to the point where you don't know what's going on anymore, whether it's drugs, just getting up to that high that you think you need to be at to make it through the day, or feeding those pills that's going to make you stable, whatever the case might be. If it is sex, just making it through that same day. Pornography, just that addiction of today, of more films, of more whatever medium that we use to satisfy that hunger. But I don't believe there's no tomorrow for those persons.
Okay, let me ask you. Let's say that I have a habit. Our viewer has a habit, and we say, anyway, this is not a habit. I really am addicted. I'm waking up just worrying about how I can satisfy my need today. What is the first thing that I should do, having acknowledged that this is more than just a habit?
The first thing that you should do is to look at, how am I going to break this chain? Look back. That's one of the things that I tell kids. Look back at, let's say, a month ago, where you felt that you were going somewhere, and where are you today? Where you felt that you were not going to be as heavily involved in what you are today. Look back at the day, like I tell kids, I work with a lot of kids with drugs. I say, look at the day that you first took a joint. Did you ever think that you'd be addicted today, where you're using $200-300 worth of heroin? Did you see yourself as holding people up? Did you see yourself as robbing people to get to the point where you are today? Look back, and then as you look back, realize that if you look forward, you were going to be in a worse place a year down the road, a month, a week, than you are today.
Okay, I look back. The viewer looks back, and this is scary. It's really scary. Where do I go for help? I can't do this on my own.
You can do that. And you know, one of the things that I tell people is, especially if you look at rehab centers across the country, and they tell you straight out, their success rate is 21%. The best
21%?
The best of them. And as I look at them and I say, you know, 21% is because those 21 enter into a relationship with Jesus, enter into a relationship with God. Because a person on his own, I think that our flesh is never going to lead us.
What do you mean by our flesh?
Our walk right here in this earth.
Our natural life? Our natural life? Okay.
Our natural instincts are going to lead us. As I look at my baby who's 8 months, and I see that his natural instinct is to do things that are bad. And they're cute at the beginning, and we laugh about it. But, you know, why doesn't that kid begins a life trying to get attention, doing things that are nice, like clapping or smiling? Why does he want to sneak around and do this thing? And, you know, it's intriguing. And that transcends to adults. Our natural instincts are to do, I'm thoroughly convinced, is to do bad.
How did the change then happen in your life? You talk about the 21% and you say there's got to be a relationship with God. How did it happen in your life?
The change that happened in my life was reaching a point one day that it was just rock bottom. Looking at two critical incidents. One was the death of my bodyguard when he went to California, and I was supposed to go on that trip and I didn't go. And Eddie. Yeah. And then I realized that it was a contract on my life. And he got murdered on my behalf. And I remember his daughter telling me at the funeral home, Godfather, my daddy went to be with Jesus. And I said at that moment, wow, if there is a Jesus, what we're doing is definitely not going to get us there. And then finally, the last critical moment was an incident with my daughter. My ex-wife dropped her off at the ranch. I wasn't supposed to visit with her that week. So I had other friends, and I was partying. And in the middle of the night, she got out of her room. And she began to knock on my door and call out to me. And she was 1.5 years old. And if I try to paint a picture of it, it's very similar to seeing yourself on a boat and seeing that your little baby is going to go down the ocean and drown, and you can barely touch her fingers or his fingers, and you can't grab them as they go down. That's the feeling I had when suddenly, here's the only thing that's pure in my life, the only thing that is holy and sanctified, trying to reach out to her daddy. But if I touched her fingers, I would contaminate her.
Wow.
And I wanted her not to be like anything like I was. And I couldn't reach out to her.
That's a powerful picture. We've got another sound clip that I want you to hear. I want you to hear it. It comes from our free program offer. And this is an interview with Deborah J. of Take Charge America. Let's listen to it now.
Addiction is absolutely 100% a spiritual dilemma. It affects you physically, it affects you emotionally, it affects you mentally, it affects you spiritually. In order to recover, you need to deal with each of those areas.
George, talk about the spiritual dimension in breaking the grip of an addiction.
You know, reaching out to her and seeing that I couldn't do nothing.
This is your daughter.
This is my daughter. That I couldn't do nothing, and she was going to just go and drown. And then reach within myself and see that, where am I today? How did I allow life to lead me to where I am? Why is it that my parents, who have so little in this world, have this joy that they say that comes to their relationship with God? Why now? I am the epitome of the American dream. I have everything American an American or anybody in the world, I talk more about America because we're blessed with more wealth here. I have everything, yet I am so devastated, so morally corrupt, so empty in my life. I need something different.
And this changed because of God, and do I assume because of Jesus?
Without a doubt. He began to work in my life. At the beginning, I thought I reached everywhere I reached on my own. When I crashed in that airplane, I just felt that I defeated death. I couldn't see that God had his hands on my life for a special time just as this.
What would you say to a young person now?
You know, when I tell a young person or an old person, I start by saying, I am everything you want to be and never will be. I mean, I was everything you want to be and never will be. I am everything you need to be and don't know it. When I tell people, listen, the only way through true joy, happiness, the only way to break a bond of any addiction or break a bond of any emptiness is through a change of mind and heart that can only come by through an intimate relationship with Christ. And they say, you're exclusive? I say, yeah, only because I've tried everything else the world had to offer and couldn't do it.
You're telling us that there is hope, and that hope translates into a freedom from addiction. More about that when we return.
The biggest message of my book is, beyond every message, one is that if God changed Jorge Valdez, he can change any human being, because I was as lost as anyone can ever be lost in this world. But the second one is that there's hope. Hope is all we have.
For more information about Jorge Valdez and Coming Clean, log on to our website at www.lhm.org/OMS. You'll find links to his and other websites.
Excuses. We all make them. But when George talked about the excuses he made for his addiction, it made me think how dangerous excuses really can be. Facing the truth isn't easy, and hitting bottom isn't easy. But it is better than excusing addiction. People who have hit rock bottom, all their excuses stripped away, say that's the beginning of freedom. And God's at his best when you're at your lowest. God reaches down with his help, and he reaches down with the help of people who know how to break the grip of that addiction. Thanks to Dr. Jorge Valdez for being with us. George, you said hope is all we have. So that's what I wish for you. No excuses, but hope, real hope. See you next time.